Back here on the White House Brief on iHeartRadio, I'm your host, Paul Westcott, bringing you the biggest political news, also on demand at allpoliticsradio.com. Let's get into it here. John Harris, editor-in-chief of Politico, a titan in D.C. media, is on the phone with us. John, welcome to the White House Brief. Let's get into it. When Barack Obama came into office, his approval was through the roof. Now, even among his own base, he's seen a massive deterioration, a slip. And you wrote a story in your paper and online today, 7 stories Obama doesn't want told. Would it be fair to say at this point this president has lost control of his message and what his story, as you put it, is all about?
Well, it's definitely true, and we've got plenty of evidence that the sort of gravitational forces of politics work on Barack Obama. He's not immune, and he's come back down to earth in his approval ratings and in other ways. The story I wrote was looking at the ways where he's at risk of losing control of his image. I would not say that he's sort of fully lost control in ways that can be disastrous for politicians. But as you say, I wrote that politics, especially at the presidential level, politics is about storytelling. You want to tell your story on the most favorable terms, knowing full well that the opposition is going to try to tell quite a different story about based on the same facts.
Sure.
Barack Obama was brilliant at telling the story of himself and making his supporters feel connected to him. That's why he's president. Lately, he has lost some of that storytelling ability, and in fact, there's other narratives that are I think pose a real threat to him. The idea that he doesn't care about fiscal responsibility. He would say that's not true, that's unfair. Right. I do care, but there's a deepening perception that this is not an important issue for him. There's a sense, as some commentators have written, that he's too much Mr. Spock, the character on Star Trek, who lives all in his head and not in his heart or his gut. There is a growing critique that Obama has a too cerebral approach to the job and doesn't feel a sense of the concrete human realities of these decisions he's making.
And you compare him to Bill Clinton there in the idea of sort of the touchy-feely going out there, I feel your pain. And
exactly.
Really,
Bill Clinton was easy to make fun of with the sort of, misty-eyed, croaking voice approach, his so-called empathy. But beneath that, the surface, which was easy to make fun of, I do think there was something very real and tangible about Bill Clinton's empathy. He had served as a governor. These programs and policy decisions he was making were not abstractions to him. In many cases, he could connect them to specific people that he knew by name. Barack Obama's experience coming into the presidency is more limited. He's a law professor and a state legislator. He's never had that executive experience. And so I do think to some extent he's viewing issues as abstractions. He's obviously got a first-class mind and is able to understand all the intellectual dimensions of the choices he's making, but that's different than being able to convey the sort of rock-bottom principle that should underline policies.
On the phone with John Harris, editor-in-chief of Politico. John, you also spoke about two what would appear to be contradictory views of this president, that he's a Chicago-style tough guy and a pushover all at the same time.
My view is if you're going to get a reputation as a Chicago pal and a tough guy who's going to break kneecaps if necessary, then you ought to at least get the benefits of that, which is having people be afraid of you. I think to some extent they've got the first without reaping the benefits of the second. For instance, the very sort of Chicago pal, very kind of conventional campaign operative mentality that had them pick a fight with Fox News. That part I get, but then within a week they sort of back down and they're giving an interview to Fox News. So,
gotcha.
I do think there is. Again, they do seem a little bit contradictory, but there's evidence to both. Not only are they pretty sort of conventional in their political tactics, that is not the sort of transformative new breed of post-partisan politician that some people thought Obama would be. They're not that, and at the same time, they do sometimes. I think Obama draws lines in the sand and then sees people walk across them.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, the frame of the Obama narrative has shifted. And as you pointed out, not in a good way. Could this affect legislation? Could this affect the midterms? And could this affect the 2012 reelect?
Well, sure, could is where I put the emphasis.
Okay.
The thing about a storyline is that they fix very powerfully in people's minds, and every new piece of information we get, we tend to fit into the existing frame of assumptions that we've made about people or events, and so that's why a favorable storyline is such a powerful asset for a politician, and an unfavorable one can be a really crippling liability. The storylines I mentioned, where I think Obama is at risk of being seen not on his terms, they're all sort of budding, I would say. They're tentative, and so I wasn't trying to suggest that he's in some kind of mortal peril as a politician.
Sure.
He could easily correct these things with a good couple of weeks or a good couple of months past health care reform this year or early next year. If he's able to make a commanding presentation tomorrow night when he discusses his Afghanistan review, that might go away towards correcting some of these perceptions.
Sure. And just lastly here, honestly, you've been watching the Obama presidency, as we all have, sort of unfold. Do you see any major changes coming in to staff positions or anything like that come the end of this year? I mean, obviously, they're a huge part of crafting this message, crafting the mystique almost. I mean, do you see that happening because of some of these you're mentioning?
We have seen some important staff changes already take place. Greg Craig's sort of being moved out of the White House in a not terribly subtle fashion. I think that was a recognition that there needed to be some Obama to be comfortable, and felt that he needed some change in personnel. It wouldn't surprise me, over the next several months. It's almost inevitable that there will be some departures, and some of that will be a sense that maybe the right people weren't in the right jobs. Some of it is, let's face it, these jobs are exhausting mentally and physically, and so I think the surprising thing would be if there weren't some high-level departures. And I have not, just reading the tarot cards, I have not picked up a sense that this is imminent in some way, that we're going to see bold-faced names all of a sudden resigning or being pushed out. I don't think we're at that point yet.
John Harris, editor-in-chief of Politico. John, thank you so much for being with us. And for more political news, stay with the White House Brief on iHeartRadio or check us out online and on demand at allpoliticsradio.com. I'm Paul Westcott. We'll be right back.